Hello, welcome to day 93 of 365 days towards racial change. My name is Tomlins Nyback, and I appreciate you hanging in there with me as we move along, looking at issues of blackness in America. Are we getting better, worse, stagnant, flatlining? Are we alive in America? Uh, you stick around here long enough, you'll get a sense of my bias. But I want you to do your own thinking, come up with your own ideas about what your identity is, whether you're black, white, whoever is watching. We've got a grassroots email list, so please feel free to leave a like or comment, get in contact with me. I'll put you on that private email list, which is really private. It's not private, and then you get on it and suddenly your junk mail is overflowing. No, I hate that. I'm going to talk about that maybe later in the year. But if you give me your email, I do not share it. Okay. So black issues. Now, one thing that's emerged in these 3 months now, more than 3 months, is two pressing thoughts, becoming more, but two main ones have emerged. First thought has two parts. First part is, does the black mind, this conditioning, the slave conditioning, vulnerability last and continue and project itself on, perpetuate itself through generation to generation? And also, the second part is, does the white mind do the same thing? Do white people just expect favor, power? Is it so normative for them that any kind of challenge to their will is almost lunacy, so to speak? I can talk about some of the situations I've been in my few decades here on this planet, but I want you to decide. I want you to think about those. Think critically about those two parts of my first thought. Second thought is kind of a concern. I want blacks to develop some financial literacy. I want blacks to develop some literacy across the board, but financial especially, to understand how money works, where the money's going, if it's working or not. You know, some literacy, the difference between assets, liabilities, disposable income, the influence of foreign markets and manufacturing on America. You know, we talk about trade wars and whatnot. I got to confess, we're losing against China. Anyway, I don't have any influence at this moment. I'm counting on God's favor. But I work hard with heavy things at night. So I'm still much blue collar. But in saying that, I'm always amazed at the volume of products we are getting from China. Does America make anything anymore? That's a big problem. So I don't see any trade war. I see a trade surrender going on. You know, it's so sad that we don't have enough allegiance to our own community collectively in America to preserve some resources from ourselves. These business guys, hey, it's cheaper in China. They're just going to outsource all that stuff, and the American worker be damned, so to speak. But I wouldn't. You know, robotics technology is really encroaching at an exponential rate, so it's going to touch everybody. We outsourced, but you know, the technology and stuff, that's an outsourcing of resources. Anyway, so those are the two things, some financial literacy on one hand, and morally, the morals and ethics of the psychology of the black mind versus white mind, and how those two interact in America. I'm inspired by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. I love hearing him on YouTube. I've never met him. I actually met him through a mutual friend we have. And so I read 3 of his works promptly because he was right on point. I mean, you ever looking for something, you don't know what it is, don't even know how to ask the questions, don't know where to begin to look, and then boom, it just pops on your lap here. That's actually been happening to me more consistently. Girlfriend should be around the corner any day now. First book I read of his, Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. Second book I read, Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice. And finally, Powernomics, his national plan to empower Black America. Sorry, I just spilled something over here. Don't worry, it's only water. And also in all this, we'll take a look at the fictional life of slaves. All this is in relation to slaves, how this is framed in slavery and things like that, coming up into the 21st century. Uncle Tom's Cabin, Harriet Beecher Stowe's phenomenal work. I love getting in there, and so every once in a while we check in with Uncle Tom and other slaves to see how they are getting along in slavery America. You see behind me, hashtag us too, hashtag USTOO, and that's kind of a response to the hashtag Me Too movement. It's a response because apparently, and I'm not versed on this, do your own fact checking, but apparently the Me Too movement, as you know, it's women's issues and whatnot, but this response came because maybe apparently Me Too is too white, and this us too is black females getting together, supporting each other and whatnot. For more black communities, Black Enough, BLAGGENUF. I haven't checked in there lately. I'm not a big internet guy. I hold real books in my hand, and I like tangible stuff. I don't want to look at my phone, which is, what is that, 3x5 or something? I don't know. So good. Good for you if you like that. Also, if you're business-minded, the Black Business School, tell Dr. Boyce Watkins I sent you over there. Again, Tomlin's not back. He doesn't know me from the next guy, but just put my name out there. He knows me by another name, actually. Okay. And we're continuing on with the signers of the Declaration of Independence, finding out, getting an idea of these men, and, of course, these men aren't alive. I'm just gleaning. I'm doing my own little impromptu dramatizations of why they signed, what was going on in their lives, blurb about the history. I'm more focused on, in some ways, their religious affiliations, their view on slavery, and how that impacted signing the Declaration of Independence. There's these 56 men actually put their lives in their hands. So we think about slavery, impact of slavery. So they put their lives in their hands because they committed treason. There was war breaking out. And how could, one of the other ideas is, how could they separate from England under so much oppression, marginalization, uh, lack of representation, no say in their own affairs. How could they, you know, make a whole big stinking war out of that, but then turn around and apply those same standards to a whole group of people and simply along color lines, color of skin lines. You know, um, I talk about every first of the month we do our Black First, and one of the things that you'll hear me say is, like, blacks, we don't lack ability, we lack opportunity, and so these Africans are being kidnapped, sold, however they got to American shores, are then subjected to burning, lynching, beatings, mental conditioning, various kinds of abuse, separation of families, castration. You know, they it's pretty sadistic how they turn around and do that to a people when they have gotten away from the very thing, you know. And England wasn't even like that harsh to the colonials, you know. I'm sure everybody can bring up a lot of dirt and whatnot, but the colonies were openly abusive, uh, openly oppressive to black folks. I don't know if America has stored up a high degree of comeuppance in the future. We're going to see about that. All right, moving on though with these signers of the Declaration of Independence. And by the way, this is alphabetical. It's the categories are loose, and I kind of like that about what we're doing here. We're not doing a linear progression through time or anything like that. We just, you know, we got this big old edifice and with a lot of rooms, and we just look in these rooms at our leisure. Might not even get to all of them because there's so many when it comes to race in America, especially towards the black individual. Josiah Bartlett, we interviewed. He was born 1729, died 1795, puts him at about in his late 40s when the Declaration of Independence came around and all that. Massachusetts born. He eventually moved to New Hampshire, not a big leap. Physician, politician. You'll find as in this overall list, you know, the guys leaning towards the humanities, towards acknowledging the human, were less likely to be plantation slave owners and whatnot. Businessmen, more of them, it seemed, were aligned themselves, with being okay with slavery and how that all came about. So we asked, like, okay, you know, Mr. Bartlett, you know, Governor of New Hampshire, Mr. Governor, you know, what's your religious affiliation? How does that impact your view on slavery and moving forward from there? So he's a Congregationalist. Congregationalists believe in the autonomy of their churches. You know, they're loosely connected, but they're autonomous. So, you know, a congregational church in New Hampshire may look different from a congregational church in Virginia, so to speak. And it's this autonomy that it's this autonomy that drives their ambition for women's suffrage, see more women's rights, and abolition of slavery. For the time, remember, it's scalable. I'm sure they had some biases, restrictions, discriminations for the times. So it wasn't just run buck wild, let you loose. I'm sure. Um, Politically, I'm sure they had little nuances and whatnot to these doctrines and supporting women's suffrage and abolition of slavery. He had a few allies. Like I said, he's a physician, so these guys were more nurturing, we'll say. There's still not enough power to have a wholesale abolition of slavery. That we live in a world, we live on the earth, we are always compromising, and the power shifts. If we can do it peacefully over time, maybe everybody, in a sense, gets their needs met, gets their agenda forwarded. But it's challenging. So he didn't have a whole lot of advocates. John and Samuel Adams, I'm sure they were probably close. They probably talked a lot about slavery, But again, getting back to the Declaration of Independence and treating the people the same way that you didn't want to be treated, it was. There are just bigger issues going on, and I don't want to belittle slavery. That's a huge issue, but these men were just concerned probably about their personal possessions at the time, and their group, the white group, it was important to get their security and safety secured. He probably was busy raising money, getting arms, finding ways to help and enable relationships across the pond. There were a lot of, you find enemies and allies just shifting places all the time. So in our history books, you'll find France mentioned, and a lot of other countries coming and participating in some ways. And also black folks were engaged in the war on the side of the colonies as well to some degree. So we don't want to dismiss that these 56 guys were very busy doing a lot of stuff, So yeah, it's sad that they gave lip service at best to the slaves, but there was just a lot going on. It's kind of the rule of first aid. You take care of yourself first, and then you're able to tend to the needs of others. So that's kind of the flavor I'm getting as we go through the lives of these men. And remember, this isn't in depth. I'm not reading 56 autobiographies and whatnot. They're all culpable in the idea of slavery to some degree. And he was a signer for the Declaration. If we just extract slavery for a moment, I believe he was a man. He's going to sit in this room with these delegates, lawyers, learned men, and say, we got the resources right here to run a country. We're going to take advantage of the ocean and the distance and just go for it. They were exasperated. Oh, I'm sure every time this boat came in from the east, the guys, some herald came off the deck with a whole list of new regulations. And they're like, enough is enough. And I get like that. When I get exasperated, I don't care. This is where I'm at. This is where I'm staying. Leave me alone or suffer the consequences. And that's what happened with the Revolutionary War. Next up, Mr. Carter Braxton, 1736 to 1797. So he was the early 40s when this Declaration business was going on. From Virginia, Old Dominion. I've driven trucks. I've been through there a couple times. Now here's our first, the appearance of our first slave owner. Like I said, we're doing alphabetical, so we don't know who was first and all that stuff. But in our series here, he's the first slave owner, owned upwards of 12,000 acres. His family was very business oriented. His father was one of the wealthiest and greatest landowners, and so on and so on. Slavery. This is Virginia. They had slaves and whatnot. He's also, we're going to find, he's contemporary of other plantation and slave owners here and in this this gathering of men, and they didn't come together. The purpose of them coming together wasn't to emancipate slaves. They were emancipating themselves, right? So, I'm sure any talk of help for the slaves and whatnot was minimal with plantation owners and businessmen there at the gathering. Dr. Anderson, he points out at almost every video that I've watched of his, he talks about not just the signers of the Declaration of Independence, but the core people who developed that document specifically had intention to keep any issues for black folks at a minimal at best. So that's interesting. So if you got a whole, I forget who he says was in the room. I think history may show like maybe a more core group of guys, but it'd be interesting to see the ratio of slave owners there making this document. Dr. Anderson says, the white folks are there explicitly. Black folks are implied there as sorry lots and different words codifying who the black folks are. That there were distinguishing marks in the language of the Constitution is problematic. It said, the preamble says "we the people," so there's no, after you say "we the people," why is it necessary to first define other people? I guess is Dr. Anderson's argument, and I think I am on point with him at that point. He was Carter Braxton is Episcopalian, Trinity, the loving God. I grew up in a African Methodist Episcopal church, so I got a lot going on there. I'm really jammed up I shouldn't say that, but my personal experience, uh, I believe, could have been better. But hindsight's 2020. But anyway, I come from that Episcopalian flavor. There's where there's an order and there's a process and a way to um, give offerings and different liturgies and things like that through the service. So I was raised in that way. Um, so we challenge Mr. Braxton, businessman, slave owner, thousands of acres, numerous plantations. With your with your God view, what's your idea of slaves, the Bible, stuff like that? You know, he was of the mind that slavery's in the Bible. Um, it's not so much against God, and the slaves need guidance. This is a guy who looks at black folks. Now, he's not giving black folks the same resources and opportunities that he has. So, he sees them surviving in these animalistic ways, and of course, he's going to have his own bias. And it's not just a bias, it's a privileged bias because he is the one encouraging their apparent uh, challenging behavior. And so his view is going to be that slaves need guidance, they need hard work, they need to be told over and over, and that's the conditioning. And tell you what, I think I suffer from some of that conditioning. I'm always waiting to be told and guided. I didn't see there was not a whole lot of proactive, original thought as I was growing up in my family and all that. It was all, I went to school, I was told what to learn. I'm assuming that when, my parents go to work, they're told what to do, that kind of thing. So hard work, guidance. The slave masters are being very altruistic, benevolent. They're caring for these destitute, animalistic black folks, is probably what you're going to hear from Carter Braxton. He signed his reasons for signing the Declaration of Independence would probably run something like to rescue his business. I'm sure, every time he's sending off, he's doing this trade and stuff and these accountings, and it's getting less, and there's more restrictions and codes and stuff, and he's not like any queries he sends across the Atlantic Ocean don't get answered, So he's making some business decisions to get out from under British rule. In his, I think, in his mind, in his response to why he signed the Declaration of Independence, put his life on the line and all that. It's too bad they didn't start out and weren't more allied with the black cause. Even though they're coming out of that situation, they're coming out of that situation and then doing it worse to another people. That's truly problematic. All right, day 93 out of the way. Tomlin's Nyback. 365 days towards racial change. I appreciate you spending time with me. Let's get back here tomorrow and see who else we can conjure up from those days gone by.